Over 3.6 billion passengers use commercial flights every year. But getting from A to B can be quite a challenge. In this series, we'll witness the bizarre.
I was thinking, what is going on?
The bust-ups.
As soon as he got within arm's reach of him, all hell broke loose.
And on-board terror.
I just wanted to get out.
All captured on camera by travellers around the world. From check-in to the cabin. We'll watch the drama unfold.
We didn't know if we were gonna live or die.
As passengers go crazy on a plane.
Pretty crazy.
In this show,
Sit down, please sit down.
one man's mission to upset a plane load of people.
Get out of the plane! Cut up already!
An airport intruder bears all with a bomb threat.
Where's the ball?
In-flight entertainment becomes X-rated. And a flying game that will get on your nerves. First, a difficult passenger refusing to budge.
May I see your boarding pass?
Lashes out at crew.
You are the worst airline that ever existed.
And a plane load of delayed and disgruntled passengers.
Lesbian.
We're in China, and Amy Lam is taking the 7,000-mile trip from Shanghai to Newark in New Jersey, America.
I was just on a business trip. I bought a direct flight because it had been a long trip and I wanted to get home.
Amy settles down for the 14-hour flight, but it's not long before she realizes there's a problem.
I was sitting in the back of the plane and then suddenly people started whispering and saying there was something going on in the front of the plane. And then the person next to me or in front of me said, "Oh, it's that guy who was wearing a Trump hat."
A passenger on board explains to cabin crew that check-in staff have allocated him a whole row to himself.
I asked she did not want upgrade.
The check-in attendant couldn't move him up to first class, but according to the man, she came up with another solution.
What she did is she told me, "Do not worry, I'm going to block the other seat."
The man feels he's entitled to the entire row, but cabin crew want him to move as they need the window seat for another passenger.
Sit down, please. Actually, I to sit down over here. There is other seats over there.
Also on board is Justin Pandello, who notices the commotion.
All of a sudden, I had seen this guy. He started kind of getting like a little mouthy with some of the staff.
Call up the supervisor.
Actually, I did.
No, you didn't.
One of the things I had noticed, I guess his attitude was like it was his way or the highway.
May I see your boarding pass? No. Why not? I look for my
Sir, where's your assigned seat?
Over here, 1, 2, 3.
No, that's not yours.
Cabin crew tell him if he won't move, he'll be asked to leave.
I want to drag you. Please let's
No,
not
sir,
go
I'm
there.
so sorry. When you cooperate with the
I beg you
member.
to drag. I beg you.
We're not going to drag you off, sir.
No, please, I beg you.
Well, I know you want us to, but we're not going to.
Oh, yes.
With the man still refusing to move,
I don't like where this is going.
the captain is called to intervene.
So if you're not going to comply with my orders, I'm the captain of the ship. We're going to take it. Okay?
But the man still isn't moving, and the other passengers are getting impatient.
Sir, can I plead with you? There are people running this.
Honey, sweetheart, do you mind?
Nobody really knew what was going on. There were a couple announcements from the steward saying, "Sit tight, everybody. There's some issues, we're just dealing with them, and then we'll take off."
After much persuasion, the man reluctantly moves across one seat.
You're fucking bored.
But he's not happy about it,
You are the worst airline that ever existed.
and his behaviour is winding up his fellow passengers.
Why don't you do much? Okay, all right, Hillary, too much. Lesbian.
I mean, there was no question that this guy was out of line.
He just called her a lesbian. Holy.
He was disrespectful, and he was looking for trouble.
Amidst the rows, another passenger joins his row. But because the man has been abusive to staff and fellow passengers, the captain wants him removed from the plane. But the situation is about to take a nosedive.
Get out of the plane! Shut up already!
When the man decides he isn't going anywhere. It used to be that what happened on a flight stayed on a flight. But mobile phones put pay to that. So we've asked travel vloggers, pilots, former cabin crew, and security experts to take a closer look at flights, fights, and airport antics caught on camera. Passengers can belong to many flying clubs with members-only privileges. But there's one elite club that's pretty tricky to join. The Mile High Club. First, this man spotted something strange on his flight to Miami.
This guy had the unfortunate seat, you know, right by the lavatory, but he did notice two people going in. His reactions were pretty classic. I love watching his reactions. Those are pretty good.
So when you see the door open and the woman exits, you can see in the guy standing behind her with this huge grin on his face. He was quite pleased with himself.
If I was in his seat, it wouldn't even bother me. Although I might try to maybe do a quick selfie or something just to be like, hey, they're adults, they're not bothering anybody, it's fine.
The airline didn't mind either, and even shared their thoughts on social media. And from outside the toilet to inside, we've got exclusive access to the Mile High Club on this flight from Switzerland to America.
I just joined the Mile High Club in the bathroom across the Atlantic Ocean. Cover your face.
It was with me. In the age of taking pictures and videos for Instagram and Facebook, we've got a guy filming himself just so he can post it on the internet.
Why? Like, why, you know, I mean, you're posting it publicly for everybody to see. Like, hey guys, look, I'm a part of the Mile High Club now. Congrats.
Wow. All right, today's been a momentous day.
There are no laws against this, and as long as they're not being disruptive, we will tend to turn a blind eye and leave it alone.
Unfortunately, turning a blind eye isn't always an option, as this couple have taken their exploits to inside the cabin on board a flight from Manchester to Ibiza.
This woman is straddling this guy on a flight in full view of everyone on that plane.
I have never seen anything like this on a flight before.
They are very brazen, these two. You know, they've just gone for it, out in the open.
The guys across the aisle are clearly just filming this, but they just don't care. And everybody else is just feeling super awkward. You just wouldn't know where to look.
You're in public, I mean, you can't do that, and that's not proper.
You can't really escape anything these days because everybody has a phone and everybody has a camera, but they must have been so embarrassed that this will forever be on the internet and that people around the world saw them grinding on each other.
Next, a bizarre contest at 30,000 feet. Sends two seasoned travellers crazy on a plane. Meet Audrey and Harry Lesnar, the budget-savvy travellers. They're an American couple with a thirst for adventure.
My name is Audrey. I am a full-time traveler, vlogger, and YouTuber.
Good morning, everyone.
Harry and I decided to travel the world, and so we quit our jobs and set off for the adventure of a lifetime.
We are definitely experienced travelers. We've been probably on at least a few hundred flights in our lifetime.
These Globetrotters have visited 67 countries and flown to far-flung corners of the world. But whilst travelling Asia, they had one memorable flight from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Cebu in the Philippines.
So we were in Malaysia heading to our next destination in the Philippines. And we had a very long travel day ahead of us.
When we boarded the plane, it was sort of business as usual. The plane was packed.
We take off. Things seem normal. You know, typically when you board a plane, you're kind of anxious, just kind of maybe get a nap in or kind of relax, watch some in-flight entertainment.
But the flight turned out to be far from relaxing.
Things seemed normal until maybe about 30 minutes into the flight.
All of a sudden, we heard this moaning sound.
It was kind of like a
It was like a
People are looking at each other like, what the heck's going on? There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of weird looks to one another.
Cabin crew were inviting passengers to come up and demonstrate their best moan over the PA system.
Multiple people started like moaning and screaming like they're having some kind of contest. We just didn't know what was going on, but apparently it was for the Chinese New Year.
The Chinese New Year happens to fall during their flight, and the moaning contest is part of their celebrations.
And everybody's kind of in that mode where you're sleeping and kind of just settling into your flight, and they decide to play the most annoying games for the Chinese New Year. So this is what you're listening to on your airplane.
So the idea was that everybody who participated in this flight was supposed to go, ah, and hold it for as long as possible. The person who wins the contest is the one that holds the ah the longest.
18 seconds.
It probably lasted for maybe 15-20 minutes, but it felt more like it was going on for about an hour.
It was grueling, it was painful, and we just wanted it to end.
Eventually, the moaning stopped. But Audrey and Harry certainly won't forget it in a hurry.
Compared to most of the other flights we've gone, this is probably the weirdest.
So Harry and I have been to a lot of destinations, been to a lot of countries, and experienced a lot of different cultures, but this was unlike anything we've ever experienced before.
Thanks, Arisha.
On every plane, there's always one person you can turn to. When they first appeared, they were recruited from the nursing profession, and the concept behind their role remains safety. The selection process remains intense and rigorous. They are still the angels of the skies, on hand to serve, help and guide. But the cabin crew role, the passengers and the problems have all changed, and the job is not what it was. So we've opened our confessional cabin and invited crew in to open up about the reality of flying. Oh, and some of their identities have been hidden to protect the innocent. Cabin crew deal with all sorts of passengers, but it's the real high flyers they remember most.
You used to have so many rock stars in the flights, loads and loads of royalty.
We get a lot of invites to gigs and things like that, like bands that fly with the airline.
I remember flying to Lisbon, and Damon Hill, the racing driver, was on board, and he invited the whole crew to come and watch him race in Lisbon. Things like that happened a lot.
We get a lot of Z-list celebrities on board who think that they're something that they're not, and the whole "don't you know who I am" attitude, and we sort of go, on board here, you're a passenger, you're not on a private jet now, and that can be rather challenging.
There are quite a few celebrities that were absolutely vile. And the ones that you thought that were going to be terrible were actually the really nice ones. The ones that you thought were lovely were absolutely turned out to be a complete and utter nightmare passenger.
The worst Z-list celebrity would be a soap star from a very well-known British soap who got on board and basically tried to take over the aircraft. He was walking up and down the aisle trying to get the attention of every single passenger to try and get the passengers to go, oh, look who it is, look who it is. He then got quite ill during the flight after having too many to drink and vomited all down himself, and then he wanted to get off the aircraft before anyone else, and then when he did get off the aircraft, we just got a load of abuse from him, and it was the worst flight that he'd ever been on, etc., etc.
Back in Shanghai, and United Flight 87 is still grounded. The disruptive man has been abusive to crew and fellow passengers. And the captain wants him removed, but he won't comply. The man's refusal to leave is frustrating the other passengers, including Justin Pandello, who sat nearby.
It was readily apparent to everybody that he was the reason why we weren't taking off.
Get out of the plane! Shut up already! Get out of the plane! I don't have to. I have a ticket and I have a seat. So I'll sit down here.
I mean, it was just like he was lashing out at everybody on the plane.
Yeah, why don't you all sit out of the seat? Why can't you get to move the goddamn plane? You enjoy yourself, okay? Go back to the big man over here that don't know how to speak English.
Make America great again, baby.
Telling some guy who's in China, speaking Chinese, that you need to talk English, I mean, is the height of arrogance, in my opinion.
As the situation escalates, cabin crew struggle to keep control.
Sit down. Sit down. Please, sit down. Everybody, please remain seated for a few more minutes, please.
Eventually, police are called on board to resolve the issue.
We knew that he was going to be ejected off the plane. They wanted to do it safely, and I think they didn't want a whole bunch of passengers on there with cell phone cameras to record the situation.
How insane is this?
So they escorted us off the plane first.
Hundreds of peeved passengers are now having to disembark, leaving the man in the hat to be escorted off last.
I know this is extremely inconvenient for you and for all of us.
Thanks, buddy.
Fellow passenger Amy Lamb is caught up in the chaos.
We all had to go back into the terminal because they weren't sure if we were going to be getting back on the same plane.
A plane load of people are waiting to discover if they are ever going to reach their destination.
And so an hour passed, another hour passed, and everybody's kind of antsy and kind of agitated. But then finally the police somehow worked some magic and coaxed him off.
Yep, showing up.
When we finally saw the guy coming out of the plane, everybody was just erupting in cheers and going wild.
Make America great again! Yeah!
Thanks so much.
People were shouting at him, he was shouting back. It was a circus.
He wasn't remorseful, he wasn't sorry, he was indignant.
I succeeded in letting you waste 3 hours and a half. Fuck you! Remember that.
Fuck you!
It was annoying to see that he still didn't care. He still didn't care that he had delayed an entire plane full of people going back home.
Lock him up!
Lock him up! Lock him up! Lock him up! Lock him up!
Lock him up! Lock him up!
With airport police on scene, the disruptive passenger finally leaves the flight.
Finally, they led him away with the police and a couple people from United and down through the airport, and that was the last we saw of him.
5 hours after its scheduled departure, the other passengers can finally carry on their journey.
The delay in total took about 22 hours.
I'm used to long-haul flights, and this has never happened before. I have never seen somebody hold up a plane for hours and hours on end just because they wanted a nicer seat.
But it's not just the Newark-bound passengers who are faced with the frustration of delays. It happens to all of us. And when you're trapped in an airport for several hours with nowhere to go, it can be tiring and boring. However, some passengers have found fun ways to pass the time. This man makes the most of his 5-hour delay by perfecting his moonwalking skills on the smooth airport floor. It's pretty fancy footwork, although this woman is clearly not impressed. At Dallas Airport, Zach and Ben are stranded overnight.
That's the last flight of the day.
With several hours to fill, they use the terminal train to hone their gymnastic skills. Followed by a spot of military training. Rounded off with a celebratory chest bump. And finally, a head-to-head wheelchair race. But it's the travelator that provides the most entertainment. In Singapore, Robin and his mates have got it down to a fine art, creating the bike, gondola, and a rowing race. Although they're going nowhere fast as they're rowing in the wrong direction. Nice try, boys. This is the moment a naked intruder goes on the run.
Here it is. Here it is.
Sparking bomb threat terror. Daytona Beach International is a small airport in Florida. Most days there are only 10 commercial flight departures. But despite the size, the rules and the risks remain the same. Policing the airport are Deputy Brian Potorowski and Senior Deputy Brad Yackel.
On an airport, you're concerned about all the passengers coming and going. You have different levels of security throughout the airport.
The airport's a pretty quiet space. We generally don't have a lot of issues here. We deal with just basic crimes, cars not being returned, stolen vehicles, occasionally found and lost property.
However, early one morning in May 2018, Deputies Yackel and Potorowski are faced with an unusual call to action.
We were notified through a airport security personnel that there was an individual running naked through the baggage claim area of the airport.
As far as airports go, this is not a typical call. I initially assumed the airport employee that was relaying the information. I figured they must have been wrong or confused.
Deputy Potorowski turns on his body cam, and within seconds the two officers are on the scene at baggage claim.
An airport employee notified us that he believed the naked male had actually breached one of the doors and gotten through a doorway out to the ramp area where the airplanes were.
I'm going that way.
But just as they're about to make their way out of the building and onto the tarmac, they hear a noise.
I heard a rustling. It kind of sounded like a raccoon, approximately 50 feet to my left.
Here it is. Here it is.
The suspect emerges from the baggage carousel, wearing only a pair of socks.
Get on the ground. Get on the ground. Get on your belly.
As I'm giving him verbal commands to get on his stomach, the suspect began yelling, "You got to get me out of here. This place is going to blow up. This place is going to blow up, sir."
Place gonna blow up. Get on your belly.
At that point, not only do we have a credible threat with the suspect himself, now in the back of your mind as a law enforcement officer, you're also thinking that, do I have a credible bomb threat?
The situation is very dangerous at that point. It basically raised the bar and made us even more alert, but we still have to deal with him before we can deal with the potential bomb threat.
Turn around, get on your belly, you're getting tased.
The suspect was given several verbal commands to get onto his stomach to where he could be handcuffed, however, refused to comply with my verbal commands.
I'm not telling you again, get on your belly.
As I approach him to detain him in handcuffs, the subject tries to get away from me, at which point my partner strikes him with a taser. The taser was effective, and after the taser was deployed, the subject became cooperative, and I was able to secure him in handcuffs.
With the suspect detained, Officer Potorowski questions him further.
What did you take?
The suspect's demeanor was very erratic.
So what are you on, buddy? They're gonna need to know when to treat you.
Molly, sir.
Okay.
Molly used to be the powdered form of ecstasy designed to create euphoric highs. But nowadays, it's more often a lethal mix of lab-created chemicals, and in some reported cases, can cause psychosis.
All right, hang tight, hang tight.
Even though the suspect is detained, the officers urgently need to turn their attention to his bomb claims.
I need to find out where he came from on video, please, and if he had anything with him.
The situation is critical. Everyone in the airport is evacuated.
At this point, we considered it was a possible terror attack.
The search for the bomb begins now.
Go find it.
Across the world every day, millions of people jump on a flight. The cost of a plane ticket has more than halved since 1970. Low-cost airlines have made it even cheaper and opened up the skies to everyone. But there was a time when flying was a rare luxury, when getting on a plane was the pursuit of only the wealthy or businessmen, when planes had proper tables and the food was served silver service. And there's one British man who remembers that time well. Fred Finn has flown the most supersonic passenger journeys ever, and over 13 million commercial flight miles.
I'm often asked which was the most luxurious airline in the world. For me, in its heyday, Pan Am was in a class of its own, air miles above the rest. The beds pulled down like luggage racks, they tucked you in at night and actually served you breakfast in bed. Their Stratocruiser had a cocktail lounge that seated 14. It was absolutely superb, liked by Ian Fleming and James Bond. The in-flight director came around to your seat with an extensive menu, roast beef, roast lamb, or lobster. It was freshly prepared on board. The food was magnificent, carved at the table. The service was absolutely magnificent, really nothing to touch it.
However, luxury comes at a cost. But fear not. Fred has a tip we can all take on board.
A piece of advice for your comfort. When you've taken off, look around the aircraft, and if you see a space with 3 seats across, move into it as quickly as the seatbelt signs comes off. Some of the aircraft, the actual center arms come out, so you can make a small bed for yourself. Even in economy, you see, you can have a lie flat seat.
And from the lap of luxury to the less glamorous side of flying, here's the cabin crew in the confessional cabin with grim tales of what passengers get up to.
The most disgusting thing that I have ever seen on board a flight, well, again, there's actually more than one.
I can remember once I opened the toilet door and a passenger was crouched on top of the toilet seat, pooing all over the toilet.
People going into the toilet without shoes or socks on.
That's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It was hideous.
No, that's not water on the floor that they're treading in.
The worst thing was every single breakfast service, you'd have quite a few sick bags. People are drinking on the flight, and then all of a sudden, hangover kicks in. You'd have probably at least 20 sick bags. In those days, we didn't wear gloves either.
The most disgusting thing that I probably experienced was people having sexual intercourse in business class. We had a complaint of a noise disturbance, and when I went there was a lady sort of mounted on top of another man, and I sort of just had to poke her, excuse me, and she was fully not listening to anything else that was going on. I did get her off him, and she sat next to him, and then 5 minutes later they were at it again.
Flying with precious cargo can pose many problems, but when you're a musician travelling with instruments, it can be a nightmare. Something these two performers know all too well. Because of their shape or size, checking in their tools of the trade can be a challenge.
They just wouldn't take it, and they were firm on that.
And even if they're allowed on board, there's no guarantee they'll get there in one piece.
A woman looked out the window and she said, "Oh my God, they're throwing guitars outside."
Meet professional bass player Rhiannon Mayer.
I play in the band Time for Three, and we play a whole bunch of different types of music. Everything from classical to pop, and we're kind of unique in that way.
Time for Three perform around 80 concerts a year, and joining Rhiannon on bass are violinists Nick Kendall and Charles Yang.
As a band, our lifeline is performing all around the world, so we travel a lot. Every time we travel with precious instruments. Renan's bass is from the 1800s, so these things are precious tools for us, and we need them for our shows.
But for Renan and his beloved bass, flying with something so cumbersome isn't easy.
Traveling with the double bass, it's a spectacle.
Every time when somebody sees the bass, there's a risk of them looking at it and saying, oh no, I don't know if we can put that on the plane or if we can fit that on the plane.
Which is exactly what happened at LAX when the band were traveling back from a TV appearance.
This is Pam from US Airways. She's the supervisor, and she's not allowing the bass on the plane. Poor Pam is just following the instructions of US Airways.
Airports can be our worst enemy. We're never really sure, are they gonna let us on?
We just got done playing Dancing with the Stars. And this is the frustration that sometimes we have to go through.
The airline says his bass is too big and heavy to be stowed as cargo, but Renan disagrees.
Now, according to the FAA law, this is a carbon fiber trunk that actually fits within the weight requirements. It's under the linear inches, and it's also under the 165-pound weight. I had even flown out of that airport and that airline several times with the instrument without any problem, no fuss. But this particular day, they just wouldn't take it, and they were firm on that.
Luckily, Renan finds another airline willing to fly him and his bass home.
So this very nice lady, she's making it all happen for me.
And even though that experience was one that hit a bum note, there was one time when having their instruments with them came in handy.
We had a show in Peoria, Illinois, and we had to rush right after our show to Chicago International to fly to the Czech Republic to play a show in Prague.
They battled storms and traffic to get to Chicago Airport and were the last passengers to check in for their flight.
We were so nervous we were going to make this flight, but we got to the front, and the people were so nice, so welcoming. They saw our instruments, and they're like, oh, 2 violins and a bass. They said bass, and that's when we knew, okay, we're good to go.
Renan's bass being allowed on board is music to their ears. And not only do they make their flight, but they also have time to spare.
We notice off to the right is the entire Lufthansa crew that's going to be, taking us to where we need to go. So we all talked to each other real quick and said, hey, let's go play for these guys.
We were just so relieved and so thankful that we just pulled out our instruments and decided to improvise and play for this amazing crew.
Oh, Lufthansa, I love you. Thank you for waiting for us so we could get to Prague.
Charles decided to sing. He just made up a song on the spot, It was just kind of flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, it was just a made-up song for that made-up moment.
That was nice. I mean, they were appreciative after we were all done.
Time for 3 and their instruments make it safely to their destination. But Dave Carroll and his band Sons of Maxwell weren't so lucky.
My guitar was catastrophically damaged.
So Dave penned the ultimate revenge song.
I looked at my guitar and I said, I've got other tools at my disposal.
Back at Daytona Beach Airport, and police have a serious crisis on their hands.
Here it is. Here it is.
The naked intruder has claimed there's a bomb in the building.
Where's your blow? You ready to blow up, sir?
And when the suspect resisted arrest, the police took drastic action. Now their attention is immediately turned to the bomb threat.
I need to find out where he came from.
Deputies Yakel and Potorowski are the responding officers.
The situation is very dangerous at that point. He made some statements that raised the stakes, making the airport a potential target.
The suspect is taken into custody and transported to the local hospital, and the officers are now on the hunt for a bomb.
There's always concern for your safety, but you kind of put that to the wayside and worry about everybody else's safety first.
The airport's on lockdown, and over 200 people have been evacuated.
We began doing our preliminary sweeps of the building.
Ready? Ready, go find it. Ready, go find it.
search leads to a women's restroom that's under construction.
The suspect had cut his way into the drywall in a bathroom, and there was items that were hidden inside the wall that could not be identified at the time.
Bomb squad are called in to determine if the unidentified items are a danger.
While we were waiting for the bomb squad to make sure there were no potential threats inside the airport is when I started to kind of reflect on the situation and realized how serious it was.
A bomb-detecting robot scans and retrieves the items, and fortunately, no explosives are found.
They located several of the suspect's personal items, including his shoes, his shirt, jacket, pants, and some other personal items inside the wall.
The man had entered the airport early in the morning, undressed, hid his clothes in the wall, and then emerged from the restroom naked.
The suspect was charged with several felonies, including a second-degree felony, which could be punishable up to 15 years in prison.
The man has been charged with burglary, false reports of a bomb, criminal mischief, resisting arrest without violence, and indecent exposure. We're back with our travel specialists, casting their expert eyes over the weird and wonderful world of flying, caught on camera. Flying with valuables can be a risky business, because once they're checked in, you've got to trust that they'll be handled with care. First, we're in Orlando, Florida. 3 ground crew are unloading a flight.
Here we've got some baggage handlers that are showing complete and total disregard for the bags that they are handling.
They're being very rough with the bags. They're throwing them really hard. They're lifting them above their heads and tossing them.
They could have been playing a game of how high can we throw the bag or how far. One guy was just sitting on the side. He was like, I don't even care.
This is probably not the first time that they've thrown the bags like this, and they probably were used to getting away with it.
But this is the era of the smartphone and everybody's videotaping everything.
To actually not only do it, but to do it in a position where they were actually being videoed by members of the general public. I mean, what a bunch of idiots.
Their behaviour cost them their jobs. Next, a passenger witnesses something worrying out of their airplane window.
We see a baggage handler offloading bags onto a cart that will then be taken to the arrivals hall.
He really did not care. He was physically just throwing stuff across. You would think that somebody would take even more care to handle a stroller and or a wheelchair.
Oh my God.
If those items were damaged, what do you expect the passenger that's in a wheelchair to do without a wheelchair that's operating?
Ya Allah, Ya Allah.
In Colombia, this baggage handler has been tasked with unloading delicate and precious items.
You can see that the boxes have some stickers on them that probably indicate that they're fragile, and he's certainly not handling the boxes with care.
More than likely, these baggage handlers have been at work for 12 hours, and they're just trying to finish up their shift, and they really can't be bothered at this point.
These guys are working under a huge time constraint, and your bags will sometimes be tossed a little harder than you might expect.
My advice would be anything that is fragile, valuable, take it with you on the aircraft. Don't check it.
We've seen how musicians, Time for 3, have faced frustration while flying.
She's not allowing the bass on the plane.
But next, this performer's prized possession gets a flight of its own.
My guitar was catastrophically damaged.
So he fights back the only way he knows how.
Yeah, United breaks guitars.
Meet Dave Carroll, a guitarist in a band called Sons of Maxwell.
I'm a singer-songwriter from Halifax, Canada. I've been doing that now for nearly 30 years.
Dave regularly tours with his band, and one time they were flying to Nebraska to play some gigs, which involved a changeover in Chicago.
We were flying with United Airlines, and when we landed in Chicago, a woman looked out the window and she said, "Oh my God, they're throwing guitars outside."
Dave's guitar took a serious battering, but United Airlines wouldn't claim responsibility, so he plotted the ultimate revenge. He wrote a song about it. This is the story of how it all began.
I flew United Airlines on my way to Nebraska. The plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, a passenger said from the seat behind me, "My God, they're throwing guitars out there."
Astonished by what he saw, Dave immediately alerted the airline staff.
I wanted to talk to the flight attendant, and so I walked up to her and I said, "Excuse me, our guitars are being thrown outside. Can you help us?" And she put her hand up like this and said, "Don't talk to me, you have to talk to the lead agent," who said, "But hun, that's why you signed the waiver."
3 unhelpful agents later, and Dave had to rush for his connecting flight. And it wasn't until the next morning that he discovered the extent of the damage.
When I opened the case and I saw the guitar, I was kind of devastated because I really felt close to this guitar. It was cracked and wood was peeling aside of it. It was catastrophically damaged.
'Cause United breaks guitars.
On the return leg of his Nebraska trip, Dave went back to the airport and spoke to yet another United employee.
I was told I had to go back to the airport I started at, which was Halifax, Canada. And it became the beginning of a really frustrating 9-month customer service maze.
Dave was passed around departments before he gets through to a seemingly helpful customer service rep.
She was really polite and efficient, but they were saying maybe my guitar case was the reason it was so fragilely broken. And eventually she said, "Mr. Carroll, you didn't open a claim within 24 hours, and so what we're going to do is just nothing."
Who says the final word from them is no?
And that's when I looked and I saw my guitar sitting beside me, and I said, "Miss Earlwig, if I was a lawyer, I would sue United Airlines. But I'm not a lawyer, I'm a musician," and I looked at my guitar and I said, "I've got other tools at my disposal."
It was then that Dave wrote his infamous song, United Breaks Guitars, which got 1 million views only days after being uploaded.
It was a really fun, empowering process for me. And it was highly creative because I stopped being angry. I felt like I was taking my power back.
Broken, you should fix it. You're liable, just admit it.
It cost Dave $1,200 to fix his guitar, which United refused to pay for. But once the song went viral, they changed their tune.
Sure enough, on the day that it hit 1 million, we spoke on the phone. And they said, "We'd like to offer you $1,200 in flight vouchers and $1,200 in cash." And I said, "No, thank you," because at that point, I had received all of these emails from people saying, "You're doing something good for customers, don't take the money."
Instead, they donated $3,000 to a music school. But the damage had already been done, and the song has now reached 18 million hits.
I should have flown with someone else or gone by car.
Since Dave's song, United have revised their procedures and allegedly even use his experience in their staff training.
When the video was released, it apparently dropped United Airlines stock by 10% or $180 million. What they didn't anticipate was the power of social media, and that changed everything for United.
United breaks guitars.
In this show, we've seen insults.
You are the worst airline that ever existed.
Intruders.
Get on the ground.
And incessant moaning. But with air travel on the rise, more passengers mean more problems. And more problems can lead to more people going crazy on a plane.